This is Housebound. I'm Chris.
I'm Holly.
I'm Ashlyn.
I'm Greg.
And you're invited.
Welcome to Housebound, a podcast we made because we needed company. In it, we talk about things that are on our mind, and today we are talking about creativity. Is there any such thing as an original idea? Or at least that'll be one of the questions that we'll look at. But maybe to start, let's put out a question to my fellow co-hosts. What are some movies or books or stories that you would just label as being like a super creative story that just like blew your mind? That you would kind of give that the stamp of, now this was something that was truly creative.
Arrival.
Yes.
Yes.
We talked about that in our sci-fi episode, but that is that was definitely not a normal story.
Yes, it was lovely.
What about it did you enjoy, and what about it did you think was creative?
Well, if you talk too much about it, you give it away to anybody who hasn't seen it, which is too bad. But anybody who has seen it will understand the commentary on how language changes perception was really unique. And yeah, I don't want to say anything else.
Yeah, and obviously they piece together the story in an interesting way that when you finish the movie, you're able to look back and go, oh, that's why they did that, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah.
It's an excellent one.
Yeah, very cool.
I find media of any sort that has to relate to time to be just creative by default. Sometimes the result is really good and sometimes it's lacking, but I think it's because the way that we perceive time specifically, and just the things that as a species or as a society, or however you want to say it, that to us remain unknown, when those are explored, that I think, and that is I think by default we find that creative because it's unknown and you're trying to put something tangible to it, and then the opposite of that is things that are very mundane. So certain movies or stories that will deal with just people living their lives, and something that would be super, for lack of better words, normal, often I feel gets labeled as being very creative.
Like a Marriage Story was literally a movie about two people living their lives during their marriage/divorce, and that's it. There wasn't anything really
fantastical.
Yeah. And it was definitely labeled creative, and I thought it was interesting. I don't want to watch it again, but
no.
it was good to watch once.
Yeah, or something like a movie that Wes Anderson has done, which might be a little bit quirky, but the creative aspect of it usually tends to not so much be the story, the elements of the story itself, but just the way that they have gone about producing the story,
shooting it
for film, and so using really bright colors when nowadays everything's very moody and dark, or very serious or dramatic, and so you have opposite ends of the spectrum, and anything in the middle everybody just accepts. But if it's super, super out there and makes you really, really think, it's creative. And if it's something that is just is like right in front of you all the time, staring you in the face, and it's so obvious, but then you don't think about it, that also ends up being creative. So you got both ends of the spectrum, in my opinion anyways. So
interesting.
A story format that I always think is really creative, and I'm always like, how did you put that together? I have no idea. Is murder mystery type stuff. So I loved Knives Out. It was super good. And that's a movie that I see as really creative, even if the artistic director wasn't like the world's most renowned or whatever. I just find the story so creative and engrossing that you're like, how did you put that together? That like everything fits in this way or whatever. Even like Greg and I just finished watching Only Murders in the Building on Disney Plus, and that's very much like old crime solving podcast drama style, you know, and super, super interesting. I really loved it. Stuff like that just, I think, is so cool.
It's always interesting to look back and see what was creative and what no longer is. So, for instance, Star Wars was the first of its kind in film, when you're talking about like sci-fi, and it was so unique. And like when you listen to interviews about it, people were like, there was nothing like it, and now there's so much that's like it, and you're like, it's like whatever. Or the same with Avatar, with the space and the environmental themes and what those aliens looked like, and now it's just like, yeah, people do that.
Well, I think what the interesting thing about Star Wars is, and even like Star Trek, for example, is that like it's almost like they used to be very unique franchises, but then now they've almost merged to be very similar feeling, you know? Like Star Trek used to be like a TV series that from what I understand, like explored interesting themes and like almost like commentary on like a lot of different like worldviews and perspectives and things like that, and kind of made you like challenged how you thought about the world. But now it almost feels like both Star Trek and Star Wars, those movies, while like exciting to watch, they have kind of a similar feel to them, where they're not necessarily, like Star Trek's not necessarily exploring super deep themes anymore. And Star Wars, I don't feel, is necessarily pushing like the boundaries and having like epic sequels that make you go, holy cow, what? He's the father? You know, like there's none of that necessarily anymore, right? So, yeah. So I don't know. Like, yeah, it's interesting on that side of things.
I feel the same way regarding movies to do with time. Like I waited a long time before I actually saw Memento, and I thought that it was really good because it was a little bit confusing, and to me that made it super creative. And then I saw Inception, and Inception was really good and came years later. But then now any other movie that you do, even if you try to do a different thing regarding time, it just becomes part of this saturated group of like, it's a new genre of movie now. So you can still be creative within it, but it's not by itself a creative thing, or it loses a little bit of its glitter, I guess. And so I enjoyed those, but now it's kind of like, meh, like maybe I'll still enjoy them, but it's not as much hype for me anymore. And so that's kind of disappointing, but
yeah. What I found was that there was that movie Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise. I really enjoyed that movie because it like merged together like Groundhog Day with like an epic sort of sci-fi battle type, I don't know, like invasion movie. And it almost had like the feel of like a video game while watching, because he keeps like dying and then just repeating the day, right? Where you kind of start over. And I just thought that was like, while it borrowed ideas, it did it in like a creative way, which was interesting, because like I can definitely see its resemblance to Groundhog Day, because it's just like the same guy wakes up every day, you know, and it's the same thing happening over and over. And yet, even while watching it, you're watching a movie that like repeats a lot of things over and over, but somehow it's interesting. You know, I don't know, like even that concept is weird, you know? And so, yeah, anyways, but those are some good not suggestions, but good opinions in terms of what were some creative movies out there. What would you say would be the opposite, where this is a series or a franchise or something that like totally lacks creativity, either from the beginning or like lacks it now, you know? Like what would you say?
I might get flack for this, but every rom-com there ever was.
For the most part,
well,
yeah.
Those play off of like satisfying
The
tropes,
tropes.
where you can call how it's going to end from the beginning, like a Hallmark movie almost.
Yeah.
Hallmark movies.
Yeah.
Those
the
are the
opposite of
worst.
creative.
Those are so bad.
I guess there has been a couple of what I would call, well, maybe is that a rom-com? I don't know. P.S. I Love You was a really interesting movie that was like kind of a rom-com, maybe just more a rom, but then also not. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, it was like a rom tragedy.
Yeah. But there was still some really funny parts to it as well. Yeah, I don't know. So there are like the really odd ones out, but I feel like that whole genre just like they know what they want to play on to get their audience to come, and so then they do. And they do it shamelessly. Like, this is what we are. We don't need to be creative about it, because whether you're a maid in Manhattan or a girl in a small town or whatever, you want to go around the corner of this brick building and run into the man of your dreams, and he's probably a doctor. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Totally. The one rom-com though that we recently watched that I thought was actually really well done was a movie called The Big Sick. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
No.
But that's a movie where you have two people fall in love, and then something occurs which essentially like takes away one of the characters, but for the rest of the movie until like kind of the end. But it's still a rom-com. And it does such a good job, like where you actually, and I don't know, it's just like a really, really well done movie.
Well, I think one of the reasons why that one isn't so predictable is it's a true story.
That's very true. Yeah, that's fair. Obviously, there's some things that they embellished in it, but yeah.
Like we end up talking about book or movies and even books quite a lot, but I'm trying to think of like in the world of creativity, in just art and in general, even if it's not.
And video games count, yeah.
Well, I'm thinking of literally like paint on paper even. I think I see the first time that somebody was like, this is minimalist and this is how I am going to approach art from here on out, because it's just a unique style that nobody's really touched on before. As soon as somebody else does it, I think this goes into what your question at the top of the episode was about. Is there even such thing as creativity? So if the person that first does it, is that kind of where the creativity ends? Is there room, I guess, for creativity within a genre of that type of creativity? So if 100 people are doing minimalist art, can you still truly be creative within that? Or are you already subjecting yourself to, no, this is minimalist and this is how I do it, or this is abstract and this is how it is done? I know everybody kind of says, oh, well, it's my own twist on it. It's got a bit of my own flavor. It's, I was influenced in my style by these people. And I think something like music follows all of the same, just like any media, I think follows the same tropes as well. There's a lot of people that do these fancy little small studies just on their own, where they upload hundreds of thousands of songs from a certain time period onto the internet and use a bot to I think one of the videos I saw most recently was a guy that had done it and used a bot to figure out which rapper from the 90s and 2000s used the highest number of unique words across all of their material. So when you're trying to rhyme with other weird, obscure words and use interesting phrases that actually articulate something and aren't just a mass of expletives that are put onto a CD.
Or words with the words, there songs with the words like fire, love,
fire,
desire,
Yeah, like your standard words, like people that and so they generated this result of artists near the late 90s, early 2000s were the ones that were most creative and came up with the most unique words. Right. Whereas people before, not so much, but rapping wasn't always a thing. And people nowadays, well, if you listen to music nowadays, a lot of it is very, for lack of better words and no pun intended, one direction. And it tells a story about somebody that really, really wants something or someone and just can't really get that person, or just dreams about getting that person, or it seems to be kind of that's what everybody's focused on. And so the music itself might be creative and sound unique, but then you realize that they're just sampling, which is a musical term for when you borrow music from other songs. They're sampling these other little beats or little phrases, and they're using it in their own music. So they're being creative, but it's with someone else's creation. So it's like, it's a very interesting, really deep and could potentially be a long adventure into deciphering exactly what that means for the topic. But yeah, I think about that frequently. If something comes out, is it actually original or creative? I guess maybe not original, but is it actually creative? Can it stand on its own, even if it's part of something that already exists?
Soundstripe.com is a royalty-free music licensing site that boasts an enormous collection of not just music, but premium quality stock video and studio-grade sound effects, perfect for any creative project you're working on. With over 200 new songs alone being added to the site each month, Soundstripe's commitment to quality ensures that you'll be getting the best selection of music every time you search. Try it for free today. And when you're ready to get creative, receive 10% off your first monthly or annual subscription when you use our unique promo code Housebound10 at checkout. That's Housebound10. Thanks for listening.
Sometimes I wonder if it matters or not. Like, we really laud creativity and like, oh, this was my idea and I put it forward and everything. But think about the success, I guess, that memes have had in the last like 10 years. Like, people love them. They bring joy. They
especially the Baby Yoda memes.
Yeah. Or like they make points or whatever. And somebody had to think that up. And they were like, this is an excellent way to put this so that everyone else will understand the tone and meaning of what I'm getting at. And so then they do it. And it's, yeah, I just feel like success doesn't have to be balanced on whether it's actually unique or not. Of course, it feels good to make something that nobody else has thought of. But like, if you're talking about paintings, I can't tell you how many paintings I've seen of a moon over water on TikTok, or a farmhouse with a barbed wire fence at garage sales. Like, oh my goodness. Yeah. But maybe the point wasn't to be unique in those instances, just to test your ability or to make something that you thought was beautiful.
Yeah, I was talking with a friend about that just the other day. I went to go see with a friend that Van Gogh presentation. So if you're not familiar with it, they took Van Gogh paintings and put them on these massive projections on these on the walls and on these like giant sheets. It's supposed to be this immersive Van Gogh experience. And it was really interesting. But what I was thinking about as I was watching it was a lot of them were of like landscapes and stuff like that. So it'd be like trees in the fall, or, you know, a field, or a lot of the images were actually of like people working. So there'll be like a farmer just like doing his thing. And so a lot of it, what made me think about is like, well, like if I wanted to go see a sunset, I just need to go outside at like, well, these days, like at 6 o'clock. go outside and you can watch the sunset. It's free. It's available every single day. There's a performance. You know, there is that accessibility of it. And yet what do we gravitate towards is drawing things that like already exist and we're just duplicating it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's more to be said on that topic, but I just thought it was a really interesting idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think all of your answers kind of get at like what the heart of the question is, like what does make something creative, you know? And like what, I don't know, like it's interesting how having boundaries like musical genres, for example, do allow for creativity, even though you're kind of mimicking each other. Like you're able to create something that has the familiar but is surprising. I think that's what makes something creative. Is something that like it's familiar so that you're like attracted to it, but it's surprising in the sense that like, wow, I never would have thought that would have worked well together, but it does, you know? So, cause I think radio tends to lack creativity because it's meant to just sound the same, like in the background music as you drive, right? I don't think a lot of radio songs tend to super be all about that creative side to like, I don't know, make you think deep thoughts or make you go, wow, that was a crazy way of, you know, throwing that instrument in there or whatever. So, like just having those boundaries can sometimes allow for creativity though. So for, I don't know, for example, like with like board games, the Tiny Epic series, which we had a whole podcast on, all of those games have constraints where they're all meant to fit in this super small box and they, you know, everything has to fit in there. And yet they're able to create a wide variety of games that I actually think are creative, you know, and do have, just some really interesting mechanics and things that they're all kind of distinct. And yet, they all share something similar. And so I keep buying into the series because A, it's familiar, but then it's surprising because like, whoa, they just created Tiny Epic Zombies or Tiny Epic Dungeons. And now I can go.
And see, you're addicted.
And see, I am addicted. But yeah, I don't know. Like it's because I feel at the same time, if you don't end up borrowing from the things that have gone before, you just create abstract blah that like nobody can like relate to, because I think we have to be able to relate to the medium that's being presented to us or the story, right? So
I'm trying not to feel like you're bashing on 2001: A Space Odyssey right now, but I wouldn't disagree with you.
Am I bashing on it?
Like, it's a creative thing that people talk about and deconstruct, but it's insane. Like, it's chaotic. You can watch it 5 different times and come at it 5 different ways, and maybe that's something really cool about it, but it is kind of like what you say. It's kind of like meh. You know, if something is meant to be analyzed, that's fine. But at the same time, you have to understand that some people are going to walk away just being like, what was that? And so,
Well, if I can dip into the semantics just for a second, I think that the words creative and unique are different.
Yes.
And are separate. That they can be mutually exclusive, but also don't have to be. Like, you can have something that is not unique and is still creative,
right? Because
it's in a particular genre of book or movie or music.
Like, I feel your first example of Arrival was something that was a very unique movie that, like, I hadn't seen really anything like it before, and even how they pieced the story together and all of that, and how they dealt with, you know, the arrival of these aliens and all of that was very interesting and unique. So I think you can do unique things and still have it be okay. But Ooh, here was a thought that I had. I think that true creativity is collaboration. I think it is working and adding on what has gone before. And that it's kind of, it involves multiple different people, and there is no such thing as maybe a totally unique idea, but there is such thing as a totally creative idea. Kind of like what you were talking there, Holly. But because I know that when I took a class, we were talking about your essay that you're going to write, you know, and he said, now you can send me a draft of it before you submit it in, and I will give you corrections or little things that may be suggestions to make it better. Now, at the point where you start taking those suggestions and making it better, and then you submit to me the final product, is that your essay anymore? Or has authorship changed? You know, like, is that fully your creative endeavor, or has it now become something more than that, right? So, and where... yeah, and even like with an essay, you're quoting from other people who have gone before, you're footnoting your sources, and yet you present it as, this is my own individually unique compilation of ideas. And so that's just kind of a micro example, but I do feel that, yeah, creativity involves some amount of collaboration, and that we actually do need each other in order to, put forward something that's helpful and aid society and gives people something to think about in a unique way.
I was going to say, it reminds me of the phrase, we don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Yes.
But somebody had to invent the wheel in the first place.
Yes.
So somebody had a unique idea, invented the wheel, and then everybody else gets to
build on it,
work off of that.
Yeah.
And it's still like a wonderfully creative, beautiful, functioning thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can listen to music that samples older songs, other artists, even from a completely different genre, and you can still enjoy that new music for the creativity that went into it and the talent that went into it, and that doesn't distract from the original necessarily, unless there's maybe a situation where it's a complete ripoff, and then that's a whole other issue. But when it's appreciating something and taking that and using it to inform something new, then that probably, it might not be the exact same kind of creativity, but it takes creativity just the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe as a way of signing off, we're going to give our listeners a creative prompt. And this prompt is, go look at the dictionary word of the day. I'm assuming Webster's or Oxford has a word of the day. And read the word, read the definition, and then go either write a story or a piece of music or draw a picture, or even just, go for a walk and muse over that word, and allow that word to inspire you. Because I think that's building on something that has gone before, to inspire you to create something unique and create something that maybe you haven't done before. And then, if you want to, you can send us, if you have a photo of the picture, or if you have a copy of that story or whatever, or poem, whatever you've just made, send it to us, and maybe we'll be able to post it on social media or read it in one of our later podcasts, because we also do need you in order to create this podcast and make it all the better. Curtain close.
How will they give it to us, Greg?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Don't close the curtain yet. You can reach out to us. We are on all the socials, like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
All the socials. Here's one.
Yeah, I don't know. Just search up the Housebound podcast on your favorite social network, and I'm assuming we'll be there.
I mean, we're not on TikTok or LinkedIn.
It's true. Yeah,
that's true.
That's very true. But that's okay. Anyways, so go find us. We're there. You can reach out to us also through our anchor.fm page, anchor.fm/housebound. You can leave us a little short message there. Check in with us. Shoot us an email. Email at us at thehouseboundpodcast@gmail.com. Yes, I'm working on the collaboration of the nods of other people on this call. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you. And thanks so much for listening. And we enjoy creating this podcast. And hopefully we've done something, something good for the world in doing it.
Because it's definitely not original.
It's definitely not original.